I, like many others, have guilty pleasures, and for me, one of them is rom-coms. Sometimes you really just want a lighthearted, predictable love story that makes you forget about life for 2 hours. So one evening, I decided to throw on It Ends With Us, thinking that it would fall into the same category. Within minutes, I realized I made a grave mistake. In a previous video where I critiqued Emilia Perez, I said that big budget films should not be allowed the excuse of being lazy. And I stand by that. Although this is not my quote, I still stand by it. When you have a $25 million budget and still fail to deliver a compelling story, that's entirely on you. And when the film in question is meant to tackle something as serious as abuse, that failure becomes even more glaring. Stories like this require depth, nuance, and emotional weight, none of which this movie manages to achieve. Instead, what we got was a film that is all style and no substance. It was 2 hours of me looking at someone's Pinterest board. A movie so preoccupied with looking good that it forgot to be good. It Ends With Us is a film that fundamentally misunderstands its own subject matter, and today we're going to break down exactly why. Now, every bad movie starts with a story, so let's take a moment to go over this one. The movie opens up with our protagonist, Lily Blossom Bloom, returning to her hometown for her father's funeral. She's supposed to deliver a eulogy, but freezes, says nothing, and storms off. Back in Boston, she sneaks onto a rooftop for some deep self-reflection and meets Ryle Kincaid, a neurosurgeon whose profession is apparently hilarious to Lily Blossom Bloom, the florist. Okay. They flirt, and he immediately tells her that he's not into relationships. Naturally, they end up in one anyway. Lily opens a flower shop, hires Alyssa, who happens to be Ryle's sister, and reconnects with her childhood love, Atlas, who is now a successful chef. Flashbacks reveal that teenage Lily once helped Atlas when he was homeless. They had a strong bond, but after her abusive father found them together, Atlas was beaten and vanished from her life. Meanwhile, things with Ryle escalate. The first incident happens when he burns his hand on a frittata and ends up hitting Lily. He apologizes, she forgives him. The cycle repeats. Atlas reappears and notices the bruises, but Lily insists everything is fine. Next thing is, Ryle proposes, they elope, and just when you think things might stabilize, he finds Atlas's number in her phone case. He pushes her down the stairs and later convinces her she fell. The abuse worsens. In a jealous rage, Ryle tries to grape her. She escapes to Atlas, who helps her get to the hospital, where she learns she's pregnant. Forced to think beyond herself, she finally decides to leave. After their daughter is born, she asks Ryle for a divorce, telling him it ends with us. Months later, she runs into Atlas, they smile at each other, and the movie ends. Now that we know what happens, let's talk about the people bringing these characters to life, or at least attempting to. Let's start with Blake Lively as Lily Bloom. Now, was she the right choice for this role? Not even close. In Colleen Hoover's novel, Lily Bloom is a 23-year-old reflecting on the life of her abusive father in the hours after she buries him. Lily is young, thoughtful, and bold, seeking to strike out on her own and make a life for herself that is as different from her parents as possible. She is driven and wants to succeed in her career and to find love, but her tumultuous upbringing often holds her back, making her doubt herself and question what she deserves, especially romantically. Blake Lively is, however, 36. While age alone shouldn't necessarily define one's ability to portray a character, I'm not saying Blake Lively is old, but 36 is not 23. This age gap shifts the narrative. Lily's journey is about a young woman, still forming her identity. Casting an older actress changes this perception, making certain plot points less convincing. With everything that I just said, let me be clear. Abuse can happen at any age. But the way this story is structured, Lily's youth is an important factor in why she struggles to see the warning signs, why she rationalizes Ryle's behavior, and why she hesitates before finally leaving him. Then Justin Baldoni as Ryle, who, by the way, also directed this film. Now, I've never seen him in anything before. I had no preconception misconceptions about his acting. But the problem is, I never once felt like Ryle was truly a threat. Ryle is supposed to be someone who seems perfect on the surface, charismatic, and intelligent. His transformation from the perfect boyfriend into an abuser should be chilling. But Baldoni never really sells that shift. His outbursts feel restrained, almost hesitant, which undercuts the film's tension. If the audience doesn't fully believe Ryle is dangerous, then Lily's struggle, her fear, her hesitation, her eventual decision to leave loses a lot of its emotional weight. And Atlas, played by Brandon Sklenar. Atlas is supposed to be the emotional anchor of the story, the person who represents safety and stability for Lily. Instead, the film treats him like an afterthought. His screen time is so minimal that the supposed love triangle never actually feels like one. If you were to remove Atlas entirely, the movie wouldn't change much, which is a problem when he's meant to symbolize Lily's escape from her toxic past. And finally, Jenny Slate as Alyssa. So apparently, in the book, Alyssa Kincaid is not just some quirky side character. She's an important emotional anchor for Lily. She supports her through some of the biggest challenges in the story. She's also the reason Lily and Ryle even cross paths again. Now in the books, Alyssa originally takes a job at Lily's flower shop not because she needs the money, but as a distraction from her struggles with infertility, a subplot that gives her depth and makes her more than just a fun best friend. Now here is how it's portrayed in the movies.
She's off limits. No, she's mine. I see you. Oh my.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I missed something important.
Oh, this is it's a long story. You can't have any of that. That's for you. It's time to get out of here. A normal person would just leave and go to therapy.
So none of it exists. Instead, Alyssa and her husband Marshall are reduced to nothing but comedic relief, and not even good comedic relief. They're just there. Now, let's put aside the weak screenplay, the poor casting choices, and the lack of real character depth for a second. Even if those things had been better, this movie still had a fundamental issue. It prioritizes looking good over telling a meaningful story. Everything feels weirdly polished, warm, and romanticized. The cinematography is soft and dreamy, making even the most intense moments feel staged rather than raw. Instead of exploring the themes of abuse in a serious, nuanced way, the movie glamorizes it, intentionally or not, by prioritizing aesthetic over emotional weight. And it's not just me saying this. Critics have also pointed out the tonal disconnect in this movie. The new social worker notes that the film feels at odds with itself, questioning whether it's meant to be a serious portrayal of DV or just a glossy, romanticized thriller where the abuse is compartmentalized and overshadowed by aesthetics. Another major issue that the new social worker points out is how the film oversimplifies the reality of DV. The film presents a fantasy version of abuse and survival where the path to peace is far more straightforward than it actually is in real life. And with all of this, this is where the film really lost me. If you're telling a story about something as serious as DV, the visual choices do matter. You really can't shoot everything like it's an indie rom-com and expect the impact to land. Another thing that I have to mention is the use of music. Now, I don't mind when music plays a strong role in storytelling. A leitmotif can be a great way to reinforce emotional beats. But in this movie, it felt like the music was constantly carrying the weight of the story instead of enhancing it. The Atlantic even describes the film as a disjointed project filtered through the glossy lens of a big-budget Hollywood production, soundtracked by Taylor Swift and Lana Del Rey, which pretty much sums it up. Instead of letting the performances and writing speak for themselves, the film relies on melancholic music to force emotions that the script and acting weren't delivering.
Let me put the water in the bowl for your wounds, babe.
It feels like they knew something was missing, so they tried to compensate with an overbearing soundtrack instead of fixing the actual problem. And the final thing that I would like to mention here are the use of colors. From start to finish, the movie keeps this warm, almost golden aesthetic, both in the retrospective and the present-day timeline. And while that might look nice, it completely fails to reflect Lily's emotional state. This was a huge missed opportunity, and it was probably the most easiest thing to do, honestly. When Lily finally realizes that she's in an abusive relationship, the visual tone should have changed. The world around her should have felt different, colder, harsher, heavier, but the only time we see this shift is in the hospital after Ryle almost raped her. And then what? It goes right back to the same cozy, warm tones. Why not continue that visual shift as she processes her trauma? Why not use colder tones to show how her perspective has changed? And then, when she finally finds peace for herself and with her daughter, return to warmth, because that's when she breaks the cycle of violence. That kind of subtle visual storytelling would have elevated the movie, but instead it stayed aesthetically pretty the whole way through, completely undermining its own message. Now, if this movie or the book had the intention of romanticizing abuse, if that was somehow the point, this would be a no-brainer. I wouldn't even make this video if that were the case. But that's not what it claims to do. It presents itself as a serious story about surviving, and yet it constantly fails to deliver that message. One of the biggest issues that I've noticed, on top of everything that I've already mentioned, was how the film softened Ryle's abuse. His violent outbursts are brief, brushed over, and immediately followed by tearful apologies and romantic gestures. And while this can happen in real life, the way the movie frames it makes it easy to focus on his regret rather than the harm he's causing. And the way these scenes are shot, it's like the movie wants us to forgive Ryle just as quickly as Lily does, and that could be the case, but do you want us to forgive him all the time? There's no weight, no real sense of fear, just a version of something that should feel devastating. If the film refuses to sit with its subject matter, it's not actually saying anything.
Idea. Let's go have some dumb fun today.
In this video, I've spent a good chunk criticizing the movie, but to be fair, there was one part that actually worked: the retrospective sequences following young Lily and Atlas. Unlike the overly polished, aesthetic-heavy present-day storyline, these flashbacks actually feel like a drama. They show two teenagers, both outcasts, bonding over shared trauma. Lily escaping her abusive home by being with Atlas, and Atlas, who is neglected and also homeless. Their connection feels genuine, raw, and emotionally engaging in a way the rest of the film does not. If anything, the movie would have been stronger if it leaned more into these flashbacks, using them to mirror Lily's emotional journey. But instead, they feel like pieces of a better movie buried inside this one.
I just really loved those patchwork like jeans that you have.
Magnolia Pearl.
Oh, yeah.
Those are my real life jeans.
Now remember how in the beginning of the video, I mentioned thinking this was a rom-com.
Hello, Blake Lively here. Colleen Hoover. And It Ends With Us is in theaters now, so grab your friends, wear your florals, and head out to see it.
The marketing is why. Not only did the film itself blur its message on DV, but the promotional campaign didn't help either. While I can understand that marketing might not spotlight heavy themes, there should have been at least a hint about the film's focus on DV. Instead, the trailers and posters painted it as a breezy romance. And if you didn't know the book, there was nothing, I mean nothing, in the marketing to suggest this was a story about DV. And now, my friends, for the cherry on top. If you do a basic Google search and just type in, "What did Colleen Hoover say about It Ends With Us?" you're gonna land on Wikipedia, the first page, literally says it in the first paragraph. Colleen Hoover has said that It Ends With Us was the hardest book she's ever written, as it was inspired by her mother's real experience with DV. So my question to Colleen Hoover, if this story was that important to you, why hasn't there been more care put into how it was adapted? Why not try harder across the board to ensure the message came across properly? Abuse, Colleen, is not an aesthetic.
You're so way too much time in school to have me laughing like this. I'm terrible. I'm sorry. I thought you were a crypto pro.
All movies have the right to exist. And I know that when turning on movies like this, I'm not expecting Inception. But this movie, It Ends With Us, was different. I was frustrated, not just because it was a bad movie, but because it handled such an important topic so poorly. DV is not just a plot device. It's a real, painful reality for so many people. From the shallow character development to the romanticized portrayal of abuse to the misleading marketing, this film failed in almost every way that mattered. At the end of the day, It Ends With Us wasn't just a bad adaptation. It was a wasted opportunity. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Did I miss anything? I want to thank everybody who took the time of day to watch this video or listen to it. And now remember, the important thing is to never stop questioning. Even me. Till next time.